Winter is a wonderful time for citrus, juicy oranges, succulent naartjies, tangy lemons and grapefruit. And against all odds, our citrus industry is booming, despite strict export regulations. It's thanks in part to a previous crisis, which has helped prepare this lucrative export market for the current challenge of exporting oranges in the midst of a pandemic. To tell us more, I'm joined by Holisa Phillip, business columnist for the Daily Maverick. Holisa, thanks very much for taking the time to speak to us this afternoon. So just to set the scene, how big is our citrus export industry in South Africa?
It's massive. It's worth billions of rands and brings in a lot of foreign currency for the country. Just to set the scene for you, Limpopo, Mpumalanga, the Eastern Cape, as well as the Western Cape, are our citrus growing regions. We're projected to export in the region of almost 44 million tons of the fruit, and the industry projects that this year it's going to pack more than 120 million tons of the fruit, which is inclusive of grapefruit, naartjies, as well as other variants of oranges.
So which are our biggest export markets?
The biggest export market at the moment is the EU, ironically. So most of our oranges go to the EU, but the percentages or the tonnages have plateaued over the years. And the biggest two markets in the EU are the Netherlands as well as the UK.
So, and yet there's a black spot, quite literally, that's hampered the export business, the citrus black spot. Tell us what that disease did to our industry in 2016 and how it's impacted on the current pandemic.
All right. So, there's an incidence or a fungus called citrus black spot. I don't know if you've gone shopping and you've spotted these patches on your oranges or your naartjies. They call that citrus black spot. Now, the EU is very strict about its imports and, they've imposed certain measures or emergency measures on our citrus producers, to implement certain health and safety procedures within their farms, as well as their pack houses, as well as the overall citrus value chain to ensure that the incidence or occurrence of citrus black spot is mitigated. Now, our industry has bemoaned these measures. They've complained about them bitterly. They've said that it's costly for them, to implement the measures. But at the opposite end of that, if they did not adhere to what the EU had imposed, they would not be allowed to enter into that market, which is quite lucrative and important for them. So on that basis, what they didn't anticipate is that all of those measures would now in turn help them come together as an industry and as a sector to implement the emergency measures which are necessitated by the current pandemic of COVID-19. So, for example, social distancing is quite common for them at farm level. The stringent health and safety measures in terms of deep cleansing and cleaning within the pack houses, those are quite common for them. So they've actually built resilience over the past 5-year period, which has stood them in good stead in this current environment of COVID-19.
And of course, it's no coincidence that we're experiencing a boom during winter. Winter is peak citrus production time. While that's not so great for the increase in COVID-19 cases, it has perhaps helped the industry as a buffer against the financial impact of COVID-19. Is that correct?
It is correct. So what happened is that they started their season quite early. So by the time the national state of emergency was declared in March, they had already started packing and harvesting, right? So they were ahead of the curve, so to speak. And also the fact that, citrus is considered a good source of vitamin C has helped the industry. I was speaking to Justin Chadwick, who's the Citrus Growers Association CEO the other day, and he was telling me, because the product is quite resilient, it's cheap, it's self-contained, it's got its own packaging, and people are buying it in packages, not, it stores well as well. It's cost effective. And as you have rightly said that, most people see citrus as an immune booster when it comes to vitamin C and as, an aid when you're dealing with this current COVID-19 crisis in a way. That's what they've also said.
So in terms of what the harvest is looking like this year specifically and what the financial impact has been of COVID-19, have we seen any impact in terms of the ability to get the harvest to the EU? Has there been a delay in borders and export opening up in some countries, or has there been pretty much a free flow?
So on the EU side, when we started exporting from the South African side, the season had closed, Justin tells me. So that's been good for them. But they've been struggling with our local ports because they've been operating at 50% capacity in some areas. So for instance, Cape Town has been a big problem. There have been instances of, the people at the port falling ill because of COVID-19, and the port has been closed, I think 2 or 3 times. The acting port COO has been in touch with industry to discuss solutions to this, because it's a very important, place from which our industry exports to the EU market as well as other markets in the Far East. What's happened is that some of the shipments have had to be redirected from Cape Town to Port Elizabeth as well as to Kucha, and some of it to Durban because of the backlogs that they've experienced. So in terms of accessing market, they don't have any issues, but in terms of getting the shipments out of South Africa, that's where the problems have been.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us. That was Alisa Phillip, a business columnist for the Daily Maverick. And certainly very good news there to hear that at least one of our industries is doing exceptionally well, while the rest of our economy has been absolutely battered and decimated by COVID-19.